Hi everyone, this is JaneTaff the Sage
And Deanna Vestal, your career catalyst.
with the Lipstick Leadership Legacy Podcast. Again, as always, this episode is sponsored by Career Path Development Group and Taff Enterprises. We want to welcome you to the Lipstick Leadership Legacy Podcast. You already know who's in front of you. We got some sassy individuals here willing to talk and chat and really challenge your thinking. That's what we're here to do. And we're talking today about habits for a life worth living. And this is week 2 with our new theme. Last week, we talked about being proactive, and this is all from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And so last week, we covered habits 1 and 2, be proactive and begin with the end in mind. This week, we are talking about habits 3 and 4. First things first, and think win-win. What do you think about that, Deanna?
I think that's right. I'm really excited about diving into these next 2 habits because, like us, many of our listeners are used to people telling them how special or gifted they are, but don't necessarily think their own gifts are over the top, unique, or so special. They do know that they love learning, laughing, and sharing insights. So this is where putting first things first and thinking win-win becomes especially poignant. And I'm looking forward to talking about more specifically how that is. I want to share. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, and let's go back a little bit to our title for this episode, because we kind of laughed to ourselves about this.
What I want to share.
Winners have habits and whiners have chaos.
Yeah. And there it is. That's a significant difference, and the context under which we were reading this week's next 2 habits. It becomes more about which side of thinking, which side of the process of cognition, or what comes next, or what had happened was. That's where the tenets of this book and this week's habits really are applicable in day-to-day leadership and day-to-day life.
Yeah, and the book is so foundational. I'm having a good time rereading all the new parts, and I have the latest edition with some other notes from Stephen Covey's son, Sean, and really just those fresh insights for tried and true principles is pretty amazing. And what's really funny in doing my research, I'm sure you've been doing this too, jumping on YouTube and all kinds of chat lines about these ideas and how people are discovering them for the first time over and over again. And that's why we want to bring it up, because it's one of those, literary feats, right? Because it's not easy to jot down timeless principles and have them be relevant years or decades later.
Yes, now is truly a unique time in history too, because you and I have been in business for at least 25 years, but
Yeah.
Who's counting?
Yeah.
And yet the treasure of being in leadership now during this whamdemic is the opportunity to share insights with people who are brand new to a leadership experience, as well as people who are transitioning, maybe for the first time after a 20-year career. And even having had access to this as part of your MBA or as part of your training for professional development previously, this time is different. There's so many new ways to look at things, or new expectations to subscribe to the norm and just adjust.
Yeah.
But these time capsule principles really become kind of innovative in the day-to-day application.
Yeah.
And it just amazes me how our community is growing and able to give us that feedback and share this with us. It's a leadership and a lifestyle experience. And I've just been enjoying the feedback as we continue to dive deep into this week's topics on habits.
Yeah.
On habits.
Yeah, and you found a quote that just made us both laugh. Tell our listeners.
So, like you said, we're always doing research and learning new things. And this week's article on the medium.com offered us a quote from Stephen Koss, who says, "You're not the king of your brain. You're the creepy guy standing next to the king going, 'A most judicious choice, sire.'"
Isn't that the truth?
It's me and me up in here. Yes.
and and the reason why that made us laugh so much is we think we have so much control, right? And in the conversation of habits, we hope that the king and the creepy guy kind of agree, but not in a way where it's simply nodding yes, even though it's a good idea. But I think what this quote brings up is our brain is wired to obey the strongest voice, right? Hence the king versus the creepy guy, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And when we can see it like that, we can kind of more observe. Well, first, we might even get offended, like, none of me or the creepy guy voice. Actually, if you sit back for a minute, there is an easy distraction that happens during critical leadership decisions, or when you think you're going to change your habits to be a stronger leader, a stronger family member, a better friend. Then we start having these bouts with doubt. Or an attitude about gratitude, right? Everything's all good, but this and that. And it's in those moments when that opposing viewpoint, it's a little creepy.
Yeah.
And that's when we get to be more than one person and kind of sire up.
Yeah.
And befriend that creepy guy and kind of put things into context. Because while I was reading the next two habits, I kept thinking of different anecdotes you have shared with me, where I've been able to grow and reflect on specific situations that happened to me and the various choices I had to make and the voices in my head. So, I want to put you on the spot today and just really find out specifically, like, if we put habit 3 and this think win-win into personal and professional context, what would you mention about personal habits where we put first things first and think win-win?
Yeah, well, when we were talking about this earlier, really the first thing that came to mind is this silly habit that actually was born out of we didn't have organized date nights in our family. And my husband is, if you're familiar with love languages, he's all about the love language of doing things, what do you call that, Deanna?
Acts of service.
Yeah, acts of service. Exactly. See, it's yours. That's why you know it. It's not mine. That's why I got confused. For acts of service, he wants to get things done while we're together. And so I thought, okay, what's one thing that's important to both of us that we can do together? And we stumbled upon this idea of we go grocery shopping every Sunday evening. And while it is not my most ideal date night, it is something that helps us connect and plan for our week, which keeps us organized, which keeps us communicating with each other, because we get something that's necessary for our household completed while making sure that we are checked in with each other. Like they say, when you want to talk to your teenager or your spouse over something difficult, take a drive with them. And for us, it's like, well, I'm in charge of the buggy or the cart, and he's in charge of looking at the shelves and all that stuff, and we're working together as a team. And because we're working together already, it's natural that we have conversations about everything else, because it doesn't take much brain power to check things off a list and find it off the shelf, right?
And when you know the story. Yes.
Yeah. Especially since it's a habit. But we're talking about what is the deeper application. So we connect, That's deeper. We accomplish something that otherwise is a daily battle, or it used to be in our household. So the daily battle was who's going to make dinner? Oh, shoot, we forgot that we don't have all the ingredients. As we shop, we build our menu for the week. And so every day we can know who's taking care of what or who's going to be where, and no grumpiness or arguing required, right? Because it's all planned out ahead of time, giving us all that ease that one, there's no conflict, it's already dealt with, and we can all go into that dinner or even dinner prep mode um, together, together, right?
Where winners are winners. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's win-win for both of us. You know, it used to
yes.
be really stressful for me to be the sole person in charge of um, figuring out the meals every day. And it used to be stressful for my husband because I would get upset and now he had to deal with it. And that's not fair for either of us, right? It's not one-sided, it's win-win. And that's really why it was such a big deal for us.
Wow, straight up. And it helps to avoid or helps to completely miss any need for chaos or any need for whining because of chaos.
Yeah, yeah.
That's amazing. And how about professionally?
Well, for the professional side, I really started adopting this idea of what I call the 15-minute meeting rule. And it came about because I know everyone's busy, right? Especially if you're working in a busy environment, or even now that we're in COVID, you have lots of projects and things that you're attending to that are deadline oriented, and yet you still might be on a team or managing a team. So the number one way that we get sloppy in accomplishing things is with our time. And so the 15-minute rule goes like this. Someone usually pings you or walks by you in the hallway, when that used to be a thing, and says, "Hey, do you have a minute?" Now, we all know people don't know how to tell time because a minute turns into 45 minutes. They actually did a study on what does it mean when someone says, "Do you have a minute?" Do you know, Deanna, that that minute is actually at least 40 minutes long?
I sure do.
Yeah, and even if you can't believe the actual time, you know it's longer than 1 minute. And so to head that off and make sure that whoever asked you for your time has your focus time. I always look at my watch, and yes, I wear a Fitbit, but I look at my watch because it's a tool. And I always say it's a tool. When you reference time, you save time. And so I look at my watch and I say, you know what? I do have 15 minutes. Let's talk. But what if you don't have 15 minutes? So I do a time deferral. So if I look at my watch and I say, you know what, I'm heading to the restroom and then I'm jumping into a meeting, my next available time is later, whatever later is, and I mention, and then we negotiate on the time. But that shows to the person that one, I want to be focused. They're important. And two, I want to resolve whatever their situation is in whatever context in 15 minutes. This is essential because you're telling them how much time your meeting will be. Now, what do we do after we've set up the meeting time? What do we do during those 15 minutes? I break it up into 5-minute segments. So first 5 minutes, I listen. I listen to whatever the issue is, whether you're saying, I have a conflict, I have a concern, I have something that needs to be solved, right? And then in the second 5 minutes, so I just listen, because the second 5 minutes is my time to reflect what I heard. I hear you are having a problem with so and so. I hear you need a resource. Whatever I hear, I am now confirming what I heard and going back and forth to make sure I have clarity. And the last 5 minutes, because this is 5, 5, and 5, the last 5 minutes, I'm discussing solutions or confirming what we just talked about to solve the problem or make sure that they feel fully heard. I have another thing about the 15-minute rule. Once you determine this entire conversation, the responsibility for the follow-up is the person who originally asked for the time. So, for instance, Deanna, if I walked up to you in the hallway or I called you and I said, Deanna, I need 15 minutes of your time to solve this problem, it would be my responsibility to send Deanna an email to say, thank you so much for meeting with me. We talked about this. You're going to support me with that. And thank you, right? It's my responsibility as the asker to do the follow-up. And the more you train yourself in this way, the less problems we have in resolving or managing our time. Now, why did I come up with this? Not only do we know people are busy, we also know that after about 15 minutes of professional conversation, the conversation starts to devolve. Meaning you're going to go into gossip, especially if your problem is about another coworker or problem with a project. You're going to devolve into gossip and unproductive conversation about other people, not necessarily solving the issue. You're also going to talk about unrelated issues, mixing your time of focus, right? I asked about this problem. Now I'm going into 2 and 3 problems. You don't have time for that. And we've now lost focus. And so I like to keep it to 15 minutes. And at the end, I'll say, all right, it sounds like we're resolved. Is that correct for you? Yes or no? Do you need 15 minutes more? And that triggers the other person in the conversation to consciously ask for more time from you. What's the biggest commodity we have? Time. Right? And it's also the most important commodity we have as employees or team members. And so if you have to ask me for more time, you better make it worth my while, especially if you're executives or just busy managers, busy team members. And so that's really important to me, that you don't run over this particular rule, because you're teaching people how to treat you.
That's the habitual part. Winners take responsibility for what they bring to the table, and it becomes win-win when you have a structure that you can practice until it becomes habitual.
Right.
And as a matter of fact, with that in mind, students can use this,
Yes.
new grads and people in entry-level positions. There's a term for that called managing up.
Yes.
But the reality is we get to level the playing field when we are the one taking responsibility like a winner to create win-win for both. I am so happy you shared that, because it's simple and sounds fun. It's doable and it sounds like fun.
Yeah. And it really talks about other personality traits too. I mean, what if you're like, I'm real chatty by nature. I can go to any subject and spend as much time as you will give me to talk about anything. But is that responsible if my manager or somebody I'm asking for time with is very bottom line to the point? They'll start getting irritated with me. And that irritation may translate into, I don't want to work with you. I don't want to work with Jane because she wastes my time, versus acknowledging I'm just chatty. So it really is acknowledging different personalities as well, which is really important in the workplace.
It's really important in the workplace, and especially when we are starting to learn that it's our ego that that either lends to protection or actually causes us to whine or causes us to experience repetitive chaos in our working relationships and in other relationships. Right. So this is such an important opportunity to be intentional. Be intentional with our thoughts, our words, and habits. Making a habit that helps us manage our relationships, get out of our own way, and really start to learn how to enjoy conflict. Not all conflicts, but in this case where your manager is rolling their eyes or looking at their watch and you can tell, I gotta either hurry up or get out of here. Yeah. We don't have to wonder why things happened. We can just snap out of it. I might be wasting your time. Let me recollect my energy. Yeah. Because I have a framework in my mind, I don't have to rehearse what I'm going to say. Yeah. In the context that you have, in the construct that you have given us. Right. That is amazing. And there's actually a time management matrix that isn't as fun as you described, but it can help keep for those of us who are technical learners.
Yeah.
It can make the anecdotal much more concrete. And on the version of the book that you have, you referenced pages 173 through 175.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, I found it, and it is that urgent, not urgent, important, not important quadrant that many of us might be familiar with, but now might be a good time to, especially at the 1-year anniversary of the COVID pandemic and new normal.
Right.
Now might be a really good time to tap in with our personal habits to make sure that they are win-win by using this time management matrix.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, I think more people are behaving as if everything is urgent when actually, if you take a little bit of planning time, you can push that out and give yourself a longer runway to solve problems, to plan for activities, to, be a good contributor to your work team. Or if you're like me, simply schedule when you're going to buy groceries so you don't have to run out every day for that one ingredient.
That's right. That's putting first things first. Now, that makes the whole week go so much smoother.
Yeah.
And allows us to be, for those of us who need control, it allows us to have such an easier sense of things will take care of themselves.
Right.
Right. We put first things first.
Yeah. And truly, how effective is a laissez-faire type attitude about everything in your life? I like to say, and I always say it this way, define the playground for me so that I can feel free to play in it. But when you have no safety with the general area, you're wondering, is it okay to play here? Is it okay to play there? Think about kids at least when I was a kid, all the playgrounds had fences. Well, that didn't mean everybody stood against the fence. That means everybody can run around to their heart's content inside the fence, right? And if you find somebody outside the fence, well, they're in the danger zone. I always had schools that were, backed up to a street. Well, that's not a good thing. So, boundaries are an amazing thing, and it keeps you playing where it's already defined. Right? All of my out of the box thinkers, I'm not talking about squashing your creativity. Right? This has nothing to do with it. We're talking about habits to make you more efficient, right?
Yes, thank goodness, because I am definitely one of those out of the box thinkers who have learned that I have more freedom when the box is clearly defined.
Yeah.
And on that note, our community is growing. This is how we know we have so many different kind of learners and so many different kinds of leaders, because we're hearing the feedback from you and how much we enjoy that. We also want to encourage you to join us on our chat that we host live on our podcast on YouTube and Buzzsprout each week, to drop a comment and subscribe as well so that we know you're out there listening, and to join us on Meetup so that we can support one another and learn from each other in a dialogue, which we do every single month. And this month's theme, as you know, directly correlates to the book, which we will review on the last Thursday of this month. And you can register for that by visiting Meetup and tapping into the L3P community.
Yeah, for sure. And we have so many fun things that we put up on Meetup, and that's how you can figure out our schedule, our YouTube channel. Meetup is kind of our clearinghouse of all the activities that we do. So if you ever forget where we are, especially on YouTube or Buzzsprout, we have links there as well. So, check in. You might have some fun with somebody you've never met before and have a conversation there. So again,
Appreciate that you brought that up, actually,
yeah,
Jane. Let's tap in on that a little bit because
yeah.
there is a framework for professionalism that can be found on Meetup. When you are, if you're interested in diving a little bit deeper into our graphics and the style and flow for the content we plan to deliver this year, that would be a good place to do some research. Although both of our businesses have websites,
Mhm.
and you can find us everywhere by name or our business on social media. We have really organized some useful information and a platform for sharing insights on Meetup. So that was really, I'm glad that you mentioned that.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's always growing too because we call ourselves a community. We're going to start incorporating other community members' activities under our umbrella because we think maybe it's just us being crazy, but we think sharing is a good thing.
We
And
really
the
do.
more we share what our community members are doing and being amazing in their own right, the richer our community is and can be. So we've been talking a lot about habits. So just to reiterate, the book that we're getting all this juicy information from is 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. No matter what version you get, it's going to be amazing. And again, our book discussion group will be on the last Thursday, March 25th at 7 p.m. Please go to meetup.com to join our community, then register for that particular book club discussion.
Yes,
Yeah.
we will continue talking about the tenets of the book and each other's experiences in leadership and in personal relationships as we go along and as we read the book. But I have another question, Jane.
Go
I
ahead.
have to know. Okay, because we've been talking about Whiner versus Whiner in this week's topics. I don't know if everyone knows, but we pretty much meet every single day. And this, yes. So last week we made a list about why we feel having good habits are important to a life worth living. But this week we added to the list with a versus type scenario, why we want to be a winner and not a whiner.
Yeah.
Well, if last week we talked about how it feels better right away, but this week we talked about how feeling bad, how it actually helps us avoid feeling bad, or it helps us avoid making things difficult or chaotic unnecessarily.
Right.
What else can you share with us about why we want to be a winner and not a whiner?
Yeah, and the one that is my favorite is it brings order versus disorder and chaos. I mean, unnecessary disorder and chaos. Do we really have time to waste? We just don't. And purpose versus aimlessness in the COVID lockdown, for those of us who feel like we've had to do a 180 change on how we used to do business, you can become very aimless in how you accomplish doing your business, especially if you're a small business owner like we are. We're used to getting out there and being with our clients one-on-one, face-to-face. And if you work in the workplace, you're used to checking in with your team, whether you're the team leader or on the team. Face-to-face was what we were good at. And now we're forced to do it this way. And that may create a sense of lack of accomplishment or at least lack of connection. And that's really difficult if you don't find purpose every day, or putting purposeful connection on your calendar every day. Right? How about
Absolutely.
you?
Absolutely, I agree. And some of the additional notes that I've made this week in this versus achieving goals versus being frustrated and unaccomplished, or we start making lists. I have found that to be incredibly helpful this week, and I forgot about these comparative lists we can detail but they're super important right now. Well, again, the new normal, it seemed like it was never going to really become normal. And then the world is supposed to open up and blah, blah, blah. We have been forced and are still being forced to change our routines at the drop of a dime.
Mm-hmm.
One of the most important things that that I've gotten out of these discussions in this year is a new way to process the changes.
Yeah.
Where that's way different than venting about, oh my God, oh my goodness, oh, I'm just not ready for this new normal and it better not stay this way.
Yeah.
And then again, like what you were talking about today in the anecdotes is an opportunity to choose and then make a habit out of reacting versus responding.
Mm-hmm.
Or responding versus reacting, and the choice to respond coming with, again, a plan. And when you know what the plan is, you can make it a habit by applying that.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to put together, I'm so excited about our retreat coming up, where we are assisting our high-level thinkers who are constantly productive and have big goals and small or large teams that depend on them, who will actually learn how to pause as we have slowed down and embrace what is actually creating inside of us, what kind of insights and innovations are happening through our experience in this time period, this bubble. And that's going to come by way of some special community building activities. I don't want to say too much, Jane, but the retreat is really shaping up, and we are targeting May of this year for our retreat time. And excuse me, we also have our community gathering coming up on Thursday, the 18th, next Thursday, which would be a great opportunity for some dialogue, some question and answer opportunities, and maybe even some insights from some of our listeners' most rewarding retreat experiences.
Yeah.
Some of the highest insights that have been gained over the last year as we are creating our own normal within the forced normal.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to these additional discussions this upcoming month. Tell us about the bottom line. Bring it on home. Make it tidy as you're so known to do, Jay.
Well, it's funny because the only thing I could think of was something my mom used to say, because she always thought my room was messy, as most moms do with their children. And she would always say to me, messy space, messy mind. And that came to mean to me, and I think about it as I sit here in my professional space. If I need to start something new, I actually clean my office first to literally clean my mind, clear my mind of clutter and all these other things. Because isn't it true, when you are distracted by so many things, sometimes you have to step back, take inventory of what is there, what doesn't need to be there, and what did I just make room for by making sure things aren't where they are not supposed to be. So the bottom line for me is clear the clutter. Clear the clutter, whether it be in your personal life or your professional life, whether you're an entrepreneur or a busy executive. Clear the clutter. It'll really help you focus on your priorities and feel accomplished, because now it's the important. Yeah.
Well said. And that is a lot more. There's a lot more to clearing the clutter than it might sound. We're not trying to minimize. We're just saying, start thinking about what that might look like. And we are here to help you with that.
Yeah.
Next week, how about a sneak peek into next week?
Yeah. So next week we are tackling habit 5 and 6. So habit 5 is seek first to understand, then to be understood. Whew, that's difficult. And then finally, habit 6 is synergize. So our sneak peek for next week is givers gain, takers lose. I mean, yeah, givers
Same.
gain and takers lose, which for people who are playing the win-lose game, sometimes in your effort to win, you sometimes lose, right? And that's the big danger in playing a win-lose game versus a win-win game, as well as understanding.
Yeah. It really gives me the butterflies when I think of it in that context, because now it's not just about avoiding fear, but in our current climate, we've got issues around race, around politics, around our personal beliefs and the way we were raised, that are causing an actual concern for our livelihood and our lives.
Yeah.
And so when we are seeking first to understand, then be understood, right now, there are some really sensitive, critical, tender topics that might be we might need that assistance, that like grassroots, original thought type of instruction for living, so that we can safely be givers. And so that we can really set the boundaries in a healthy ways for takers.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm gonna leave our audience with this challenge. Seeking first to understand. We often take this context into understanding someone else, but do you understand yourself first? Do you actually understand why you have this position, why you have this opinion, why you have this belief, so that when someone asks you about it, you can say it in a calm way with full conviction, because you really know what you believe and why you believe it. I think people use, and we'll get into this next week, but it was just so heavy on my mind. I think people use the current cultural conversations to ignite fires that they don't understand might not be put out right away. And they don't understand them, and so we get into the emotional minefield versus really helping someone else understand, to bring about empathy and compassion, which is the true purpose. I don't know anybody who shares their beliefs and their positions without the desire to be understood. But if you don't understand where that's coming from, you are creating a dangerous environment for yourself first. So, that's my challenge to you, is to think about why you believe what you believe, so that you will be understood and get the empathy and understanding that you so desire.
Wow, great challenge.
Yeah.
Man, thank you for joining in with this week's Lipstick Leadership Legacy Podcast.
Absolutely. This is JaneTaff the Sage.
And Deanna Vestal, your career catalyst.
May your lipstick stay fresh and your attitude stay sassy. We'll see you next week.